But I think also what's so important is to remember that these are multi-generational homes. Right? So grandmother lived here, great-grandmother lived here, and it was passed down. Yeah. And I think that's also the fight of the community, too, because if grandmother paid $33,000 for this home, but someone's coming in and offering you $500,000 for this home, and you did nothing but live here, you may take the money. And so that's what they're worried about. They're worried about the changes of the community and the younger folks who may see the money and take the money.
Real 92.3, LA's new home for hip hop, Big Boy's Neighborhood. Beautiful day in the neighborhood, ladies and gentlemen. If you know, you know. If you don't, consider this an introduction. Mimi Brown, welcome to the neighborhood, Queen.
Thank you for having me, Big Boy.
It is my pleasure. It is. Now, I've been listening to your podcast, right? And I usually don't book people that sound as professional or better than us. But you have such a journey and a story that I do want to share with people because recently, there was devastation when it came to the fires that was going on out here. And so many people to this day, at one point, everybody's on it. But then when kind of the smoke clears or when certain things happen, you get back to your own life and your own situation, and those things happen and they should happen. Yeah. But sometimes you really want to say, there's people that still going through it right now, even more so because now the battles begin. So when you thought about To Altadena With Love, what did To Altadena With Love, what did that mean to you?
When I thought about To Altadena With Love, I went to Altadena for one story. I went there to see the devastation like every other reporter. And when I got there, I realized that this just isn't story, that I'm looking at history, like modern day history was unfolding right before my eyes. And I wanted to capture it. And it was so important to get the stories of the people in the moment that it was happening. When I looked around and I realized that this was a community of people who had fought so hard to even exist in this community. And I think that's the story that's missing. Like, if you go back 50, 60 years and you realize that this community is here because of redlining, this community fought systemic barriers just to even exist. And now, fast forward, 60, 70 years, they're fighting again to just rebuild. And what's that going to look like in today's social, economic, political climate, right? Are they even going to be able to do that? And so I wanted to capture their words and their stories in their own words. Like, I wanted to allow them to tell their own stories. And so that's what To Altadena With Love is all about. It is literally the community talking to me in their own words, telling me what happened to them the night of the fire, remembering Altadena the way that they remembered it before the fire, and inviting us to get a glimpse of what Altadena looks like through their eyes, because I think that that's what's missing in the stories today.
And a lot of people, you watch through the news, you watched on TV, and a lot of people, went out and did efforts as well. But there's a texture that comes with speaking with someone, and even listening to the podcast, just with people talking about their stories, like, the water didn't work, not having time to grab anything. Like a buddy of mine that I've known for years, his mom lived in that house for 45 years and lost their home. And the one thing that he said, his father passed last year. He was like, Big, he said, I wish I would have got in and got my dad's pictures. Things that you see all the time or you don't even think about. Think about really if something was sweeping through your neighborhood and you thought, okay, I'll sit in my car, I could wait it out. The fire department to be here, and you're looking up the street and the fire department isn't there. And for whatever reason, maybe they were overwhelmed, whatever it may be. But you're sitting there, and what do you think you would take right now?
And that's the question that so many people had to face, right? What do I take? What can I take? And as you still, you mentioned that the water wasn't there for the community. They didn't know what to do. Somebody said in the series, you could take a bucket of water
and put the fire
out. But there just was no water. So you are looking at a community that was defenseless, right? They had nothing to fight with to save their homes, to save their community. And I recently did a benefit concert in Altadena, and I heard so many more stories. And so what has been important to me was to humanize this tragedy, right? Because we hear 9,000 structures structures died.
Yeah.
There were 9,000 structures that were demolished. But each of those 9,000 structures, they have a story. And so when I was talking to people in the community, I heard stories of someone telling me they woke up at 4:45 a.m. in the flames and had to get out at 4:45. The warning didn't come. It didn't come till they were late, right? On there's a west side of Altadena and there's an east side of Altadena. In our podcast, we uncovered the discrepancies between when the west side got the notification and when the east side got the notification. So when I'm talking to folks and they say, "Oh, I was asleep at 4:45 a.m. when the fire came through and I had to fight through flames to get out of my house," they're looking at their leaders and they're asking, what happened. And then you hear other stories of, to your point, this woman, she's in her 70s, she's been diagnosed with PTSD. Every time she hears about the fire, because her son died in the war and all of his items were inside the house. Yeah. So the flag that he was buried with, so every time she hears about something, she gets traumatized all over again. And so I think what's so important about this podcast, this docuseries, is it's educational, and it will teach you and it will remind you that these are humans and these are human lives. And this is a sector of history that I don't know is ever going to come back the way it was. And so I wanted to capture that. I wanted to capture that memories, those moments for them, and share it with the world, because as you said, the news cycle is changing every minute.
Yeah, very much so. And we've seen it so many times where it's like what happens today, you feel it today.
Yeah.
And then there's real things that happen and it's like, okay, well, that's in my rearview mirror. But you don't understand that so many people are looking through the windshield still. And there's a lot of healing. And you got to think, even just walking out wherever you live right now, think about your entire neighborhood, your entire community being gone.
Yeah.
And you got to think, if you had one incident or a situation that happened at your home, you could go to your neighbor's house and maybe they could help you out. This one, you don't have neighbors to go help you out because everybody is in the same position. And then when you look at it, you say, well, why this area? And we've seen it before. And you also had a chance to mention it in the podcast too, where we saw this with, you say post Katrina, we saw it. Black Wall Street, we saw it. Certain areas after, the Rodney King riots, we saw it. Yeah. And this could be another one of those things where you can't even pinpoint. Now you're wondering, how did this even start? And I understand that, we weren't prepared for it as far as the firefighters and no disrespect or anything to them. It was overwhelming. But now when you sift through the ashes, no pun intended, you start to look at what happened here. Yeah. And now we're going to see a lot of people that I hope that they can get back to their community. I'm hoping that they can rebuild and come back, but you're looking at people that probably may not get a chance to.
And that's the worry. They're worried that their community won't come back the way they left it. They're worried.
You see the robberies, the burglaries.
Oh yeah,
they're up 400% right now in that area, but not Pacific Palisades, because Palisades got the guards and but they're 400% increase when it comes to
it's funny you say that, because in episode 5 we talked to Stacy, Stacy Bolden, and her house did not burn down. But her neighbors and they have formed a pact to make sure that their houses are safe because of the looters in the area. And so they said that they were fine when the National Guard was out, but the National Guard is gone now.
Right.
Wow.
And so now they're worried about their stuff being taken, and they're having this. It's like a whole other fight. Right. So it's like the community is being re-victimized all over again with certain things, with fighting for insurance. A lot of people were undercovered or not covered at all. I talked to a gentleman who owned his house outright and he didn't have home insurance at all. The entire home burned down. And so now he's raising money. He's trying to raise money to rebuild or to even stay in an Airbnb. He's working with FEMA, but so many other people are working with FEMA. And so, it sounds crazy to you, but when you really think about this community, I learned from episode 2 that, what was his name? Mr. Childs, he paid $33,000 for his home. His home was worth $2.1 million when it burned down. So he had it insured, but a lot of people who paid $33,000 and they thought, okay, I'm good. And now they're not. And so we're finding, these stories of people just trying to figure out how to pick up their lives, and they want Altadena to stay in the news. They want these stories to continue, because if you can humanize people, then you have a better chance of caring what's going on in that community. And everybody I've spoken to, they say, we will rebuild. We are Altadena, Pasadena strong. We're not going anywhere.
Not just what made you go cover the story, what made you stay? Because there's a difference, and a lot of gigs, people went and they covered the story, understood. But what made you stay?
The people, the community. I've never seen anything like it in my life. They are resilient. This happened to them, but everybody has said at the end of the day, God is good. We're going to rebuild.
Yeah.
We are a community. We're going to stay together. We are not letting outsiders, people who don't fit this community, come in. We're going to ban. We're going to save our elderly. We're going to save our vulnerable. We're going to make our own fund. We're going to raise money for each other. We're going to make sure that we look out. When the fire hit, I spoke to people who were they were telling me that in Altadena, there's parts that don't have cell service, and they rely on Wi-Fi to be able to, use their phones. People were risking their lives going door to door to make sure their neighbors got out. And so this is a community that cares about each other. They care about the homes that they built, the community, right? There's schools. People are raising money for the schools that burnt down before they're raising money to get back into their homes, right? Yeah. So it's the people for me. I'm grateful that they have allowed me, an outsider, into their community, and they trust me enough to tell these stories and to be able to be a voice that will lead back to them and hopefully, help their cause.
One story is already too many, and then when you have so many people that have a story or a like story, or maybe how many people possibly talk to you, or even just, being from LA and hearing so many different stories that weren't on the news. I mean, people that we were just talking to, like, Big, my mom lost her house. Big, my cousin lost the house. And even watching the news and seeing people try to go back and going back to total devastation. Like my buddy Romai, when he went back, he said he was driving through the flames trying to save his house, and his mom is in her 80s. And like I said, she's been in that particular house for 45 years. So can you imagine just waking up and you have to get out? And and you can't see anything. And I don't know if anyone's ever been in a fire. I have. You don't understand what this look like, what this feel like, what the community looks like, and what that feels to you. Yeah. And he's trying to move his mom out. Other people, they're trying to move family. And let alone people say, oh, I would go back in and get that. You don't have time to go back in and get that.
You don't.
Yeah.
I heard that so many times. I heard, we didn't have time to grab anything. There was a family whose mother, a 91-year-old mother, was in a wheelchair. They were trying to get her out of the flames. I talked to a teen. Of course, I asked him, I said, well, what did you grab? He's like, I tried to grab my shoe collection.
Right.
Everybody was
It's
trying
crazy what's important to you, huh?
Right. What's important to you? He tried to get what he could, and so you hear, but I think also what's so important is to remember that these are multi-generational homes. Right, so grandmother lived here, great grandmother lived here, and it was passed down. Yeah. And I think that's also the fight of the community too, because if grandmother paid $33,000 for this home, but someone's coming in and offering you $500,000 for this home, and you did nothing but live here, you may take the money. And so that's what they're worried about. They're worried about the changes of the community and the younger folks who may see the money and take the money. And so they're trying to, just make it so that everybody has a stake in that. They understand the benefit of generational wealth. Yeah. And so they won't.
And we saw the change with New Orleans.
Absolutely.
After Katrina, what happened, and some people never came back. Yep. And what some of the communities are looking like now if you go over there, because, you were able to grab the land. Yeah. And you're seeing right now, that's the one thing when we say, man, people want to come back and build this community again, is because it becomes a land grab.
That's exactly what it is.
And we see certain things that, oh no, that couldn't possibly happen. But if you know your history, it happens. And it happened time and time again. Yeah.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hawaii is another place.
There's a lot of property.
And these aren't cards people are playing. There's no race cards. This is like realities. Yeah. And these are real people lives.
Yeah.
You know, and so with your podcast, and when we talk about the actual To Altadena With Love, how do we find that?
Absolutely. So you can go anywhere you listen. You can get your podcast. You can put into.
You sound like one of those commercials. Wherever you get your podcast, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, wherever you get your podcast, you can search To Altadena With Love. We also have a website, toaltadenawithlove.com. It will also take you to the website.
And Mimi, give us some background on you. You got to get double jointed sometimes and pat yourself on the back. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, Big. I'm a journalist. I worked for Fox, the local Fox 11, for about 10 years. I've worked at NBC, and I'm a news reporter. I went to Howard University.
Okay, now.
Yeah, and so I love storytelling. Right.
Yeah.
I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. And watching people on the news.
You grew up in Anchorage, Alaska?
I grew up in Anchorage,
How
Alaska.
did that happen?
My mother actually moved from LA to Anchorage.
Damn. She was like, I'm out of here, huh?
She was out.
She was like, I'm going to go where they never find me. You ain't going to find me no damn Anchorage, Alaska.
Absolutely. But my family is in South LA. And so, we moved to Alaska. And so when I left Anchorage, I went to Howard, and then I came back to LA.
I heard that.
Yeah.
And Emmy nominated?
Emmy-nominated
Thank you all
journalist.
bad.
Wow,
Yeah.
she is that.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? They ain't never nominated. Hey, dude, and when I started seeing the accolades and Neil was like, yeah, I was like, man, I don't know if I want her on. You know, because it's different when other people look at you, Mimi, and they're like, oh man, Big is the one. And then you bring somebody else and they're like, well, maybe not. You know, well, maybe not. You know, but it's such a journey and a story.
Thank you.
That you've taken on, because a lot of people, we want low hanging fruit and we want what's easy for us. You know what I'm saying? But to actually go and talk with people and look into their eyes, a lot of people don't want to do that. And we've seen people that just pull up to the neighborhood, they get the footage and they're out.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand getting the story out there, but for you to stay there and talk to people and talk about their stories and what's really going on, because if we don't say it, they're going to play like they don't hear it. And
That's
everything that we fear will appear.
Exactly. And then that was my concern. Meeting these people, once you meet them and once you talk to this community, your attitude or what you thought you knew about this fire and who it affected will change. Like if you have a heart, once you listen to this podcast, you listen to these stories, you can't help but care. Like you just can't. It is so heart gripping. It's so real. It's raw emotion, right? And it takes you there, and you want to do something about it. And so I'm grateful to my iHeart family, the Black Information Network, for just allowing me to put this in a series that I can share to the masses, because it literally is a story that needed to be told
And continue.
and continues. Like I said, when I was at the benefit concert, I realized. There's everyone has a story, and each story just it takes you there. You feel like you're there. You can visualize it, and so as long as I can, I am committed to telling the story.
Was there and I could be probably not listening correct, but in episode 2, was there someone explaining about their neighbor that tried to fight the fire, and did that person end up passing?
No, so they didn't end up passing, but he was saying that he saw his neighbors, and I think it was episode 1, he was saying he saw his neighbors on the roof. And that one...
trying to wet it down. Yeah.
He said one brother was on one side, the other brother was on the other side. They ended up saving the house, and they were
Was
getting
that the
water
Shaw
bottles.
family or something like that? It was a family I remember.
It wasn't.
She
the
like, babe, we got an episode. She was like, you should know this.
right. It wasn't the Shaw. I don't know if he said the name.
Okay.
But he was telling the story. But in episode 2, which I have to give her a shout out. I reached out to Ava DuVernay because I wanted to feature Mr. Henry Sanders, who was on her show Queen Sugar.
Okay.
So I wanted to reach out to Ava DuVernay because she featured on her Instagram. She told the story of Mr. Henry Sanders, and he was in her show Queen Sugar. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, I would love to talk to him. She put me in contact with him. Actually, he called me. I missed the call. She hit me and said, he's trying to call you. And so I went to his house, I went to where he was staying. And we sat down and we had a conversation. And he was telling me that, he was the one who actually had to get his 91-year-old mother-in-law out of the house in a wheelchair. He shared a story with me He told me that actually his acting community had rallied behind him. He was staying in Coleman Domingo's house now, and that was something that, Ava and the whole community had helped him set up, and he was truly grateful for that. And then I learned his wife, who grew up in Altadena, Jackie Robinson's wife, was her babysitter. I mean, these stories are so weaved together of the community and the history.
And I was listening to the podcast, and we had a chance to see it in so many other different stories, but even people that was like, man, I couldn't get my car out. Think about everything at your home being destroyed. And it's so easy to say, oh, that happened to them. And, and we were on fire watch, and we had to get evacuated one day, and those things become real. It becomes real. And there's some people that turn on the news and like, oh, the fire's still going. And granted, you're not a part of it. Oh, the fire's still going. But then you got to think about the real actual people that went through something.
Absolutely.
And what I love about you as well, Mimi, is that you continue to be a voice, and not just for the voiceless, but a voice that can amplify those voices out of those communities as well.
Thank you.
So you're doing great work. How many episodes is?
There's 5 episodes. Okay. It's a 5-part series. We did a bonus episode, just that it's with Dr. Brent Munson, and if you're from Altadena, this episode is for you. It is just telling you, giving you ideas on how to rebuild. He's telling you, there's certain titles and SB title numbers that I don't know that can help you rebuild and build generational wealth on your land. And so it's very important to just listen to. And he just gives you ideas on how you can make, you can come back even stronger than you started if you were affected by the fire.
Man, I know. I don't even know how to address them, but my daughter's boyfriend. They, just watching the videos of them having to leave their home and what they were rolling through and driving through, and their neighbors, a lot of the neighbors' homes were totally destroyed. They got, the fire hit them, but it didn't burn them down. But even surviving structures, how long it's going to take with whatever is in your filtration, your system, even if your house didn't get destroyed, you still can't get right back into your property on a lot of them. And that's why when you're saying about someone that their homes are okay, but now you got people that's doubling and tripling back, trying to take what you have, and some people didn't even have that.
Yeah, and a lot of people were house rich, right?
Yeah.
Their house was their money.
Yes.
That's what they had. That was their access to wealth, right? And now they have nothing. I think in this, and a lot of people can't afford to rebuild in this economy, right? Like, there's so much that we're going to find out that we're going to uncover as this goes on. That rebuilding process, I asked someone how long they can expect. They said up to 5 years. It could even be longer. And you have to remember that I think there was a great percentage of Altadena residents were 65 and older, right? And so what does that look like for them? I'm hearing stories of people who are now in 2-bedroom condos who had a $2-point-something million home, and they've lived there for 40, 50 years. The mental, the emotional impact that a lot of this is having on some of the community, the older community. I just think that we have to hold them in our thoughts and make space for that, because this is devastating. And as you mentioned, Big, I went back and I looked in episode 4 and I compared it to other tragedies. The reality is this neighborhood may never come back the way that they remembered it, but they are trying their hardest at least to carve out a slice and do what they can for the rest of the community to make sure that it at least resembles something that it used to look like.
Well, Mimi, thank you for coming into the neighborhood and sharing
amazing work.
That with us. And once again, where can we find you? Are you on Instagram as well?
I'm on Instagram. You can find me at Mimi Brown TV on all platforms.
Cleverly hit it there, huh? Cleverly hit it on the Mimi Brown TV, huh?
Genius.
And once again, through the iHeartRadio network, you're there.
I am.
Yep, and Black Information Network. I ain't mad at you. And thank you, Mimi Brown, for coming into the neighborhood and sharing. And keep us going with it, too. Because this isn't a story that we say, okay, well, we spoke with Mimi, it's over. Yeah, it's a lot of building. And thank you for being on that front line as well. All righty now. My pleasure, Big Boy.